The photograph that you are currently viewing right now captures a specific scene which occurred on February 19th, 1945, at precisely 10 past 9 in the morning, on the Red Beach 1 sector of the southeastern shore of Iwo Jima. Corporal Tony Stein, a soldier of the 28th Regiment, 5th Marine Division, is currently pressing his entire body flat against the scalding hot black volcanic ash. The surrounding air is completely filled with the pungent smell of sulfur and the bloody scent of high explosives tearing through human bodies. Overhead, the tracer rounds from Japanese Type 99 light machine guns are whipping across the beachhead, just like a lash. Comrades beside Stein are being nailed to the sand, one by one, unable to move even a single inch. Stein is tightly clutching that strangely shaped weapon in his arms. That is not the standard M1 Garand issued to the U.S. military, nor is it the heavy Browning M1919. It is a freak of nature dismantled from a crashed Dauntless dive bomber. He pulls the bolt handle, and the sound of metal colliding is crisp and piercing to the ear. In the very next second, he launches his entire body out of the shell crater. During the course of the Second World War, although the standard issue Browning M1919 machine gun was undeniably effective, boasting a firing rate of 400 rounds per minute, the weapon itself weighed a staggering 31 pounds, making it acceptable for defense, but incredibly cumbersome for offense. Stein had realized this specific problem months earlier. In November 1944, at Camp Tarawa in Hawaii, he witnessed machine gun crews struggling during their training. The gunner could not keep up with the advancing speed of the rifle platoon, as setting up, firing, and dismantling to move would consume several minutes, by which time the tactical opportunity was already lost. Tony Stein was originally a toolmaker. He was born in Dayton, Ohio, to parents who were Austrian Jewish immigrants fleeing from Eastern European anti-Semitism. During his teenage years, he operated lathes at Patterson Field, and later worked as a tool and die maker at the Delco Products Corporation, deeply understanding the pros and cons of mechanics. After joining the Paramarines in September 1942, this mechanical mindset followed him to the campaign on Bougainville. He had once single-handedly killed 5 Japanese snipers in a day, but what really made Sergeant Merritt Greavy notice him was his ability to modify equipment. During the Bougainville campaign of 1943, Greavy recovered an A&M-2 aerial machine gun from a crashed Douglas SBD Dauntless dive bomber. This type of machine gun was designed specifically for air combat, weighing only 21 pounds, which is 10 pounds lighter than the M1919, and more importantly, its firing rate could reach 1,200 to 1,500 rounds per minute, which is 3 times that of the former. But problems also came with it. The A&M-2 was equipped with spade grips for aircraft mounting, lacking a stock or sights, meaning a single soldier could not carry and fire it stably during an advance. In November 1944, when the Paramarines were disbanded, both men were transferred to the 28th Regiment of the 5th Marine Division, where they were preparing for a notoriously vicious battle that was kept secret by high command but known to all. Greavy showed this A&M-2 to Stein, and Stein saw its potential, so the two men worked late into the night in the maintenance shed. Stein sawed off the stock of an M1 Garand rifle, hollowed it out to accommodate the machine gun's buffer tube, and fabricated an electric trigger mechanism using metal scraps. Greavy welded the bipod from a Browning automatic rifle to the front, and also added the rear sight from a Browning automatic rifle for aiming. The final product, though crude, weighed 25 pounds and was fed by a 100-round ammunition box, capable of emptying the box in just 5 seconds of continuous fire. They called it the Stinger. Stein built a total of 6 guns, distributing them to the 3 rifle platoons of G Company, the demolition team, Greavy, and himself. Other Marines had mixed reactions to this. Some praised its ingenuity, while others dismissed it as a death trap. One sergeant, after looking at this improvised weapon, claimed it would jam after the first burst. Another stated the barrel would melt after 2 magazines, and a lieutenant from the 2nd Battalion even bluntly said only an idiot would bring an airplane gun into an infantry battle. But when Stein tested it at the range, emptying a whole box of ammo in 6 seconds and hitting a target 200 yards away, the doubters were all silenced, and even the commander and battalion headquarters approved its use. The Stinger was about to head to the battlefield. At this moment, on the beach of Iwo Jima, Stein grips the weapon tightly, the barrel already somewhat warm, while comrades around him are constantly dying because they cannot find the hidden Japanese positions. According to standard procedure, one should call for tanks or naval gunfire support, but the tanks are deeply stuck in the loose volcanic ash, and naval guns cannot hit invisible targets. Stein made a decision. He stood straight up on the beach, covered by the Japanese crossfire web, exposing himself to attract enemy attention. He needed the enemy to reveal their positions. He needed to see the muzzle flashes. Bullets whistled right over his head, and mortar shells detonated in the nearby volcanic ash. Very quickly, he discovered a bunker 75 yards to the northwest, camouflaged with volcanic rock and sand, where the barrel of a Type 92 heavy machine gun was exposed by only a few inches. Stein mounted the Stinger to aim, pulled the electric trigger, and the weapon roared at a rate of 1,200 rounds per minute. The barrage of 30 caliber bullets instantly destroyed the bunker, and the Type 92 heavy machine gun fell into silence. Through the smoke and dust, he saw movement inside the position, which then returned to stillness. He turned to aim at a second bunker 40 yards to the left. It was another burst of 5 seconds of continuous fire, and although the concrete structure blocked some bullets, the intense firepower was impossible to withstand, and the Japanese gunner inside the bunker stopped firing. The surrounding Marines began to move. Riflemen leaped up from the sand craters to advance. Sergeants shouted orders, and the offensive commenced again. Stein rushed toward the first bunker. The Stinger was lighter than the standard M1919, allowing him to carry it while running. A few seconds later, he arrived at the position, where 3 Japanese soldiers inside had already fallen dead, as the 1,200 rounds per minute rate had destroyed almost everything. The second bunker saw the same result. 2 enemy troops were killed, and the position was destroyed. But at this time, Stein felt the Stinger in his hands become lighter. 100 rounds of ammunition had been exhausted in less than 10 seconds of actual firing time. He had anticipated this problem during training, but experiencing it personally in actual combat was completely different. The Stinger was amazingly powerful, yet also extremely ammo-hungry. Stein looked back toward the beach 200 yards away. The supply point was near the waterline, and landing craft were still unloading supplies under sporadic mortar fire. He had to cross the completely uncovered, open ground to acquire more 30 caliber belted ammunition. The volcanic sand made every single step incredibly difficult. This volcanic ash was loose and multi-tiered, sinking easily when stepped on, which the Marines called running on ball bearings, and Stein's boots sank 3 inches with every step. Halfway there, he encountered a wounded private from the 2nd Platoon, whose left leg was hit by shrapnel. He was conscious, but unable to walk. Stein grabbed him onto his shoulder and continued running. This soldier weighed 160 pounds, the Stinger 25 pounds, plus Stein's 30-pound combat pack. He was moving forward carrying over 215 pounds on a beach covered by Japanese mortars. At 09:45 a.m., he reached the supply point. A corpsman took over the wounded, and Stein grabbed 4 ammo boxes, stuffing 2 into his pack and carrying 1 in each hand, turning to return to the platoon position. The return trip took 3 minutes. Japanese snipers had begun aiming at Marines moving between the beach and forward positions. Bullets kicked up black volcanic ash at Stein's feet, and a mortar shell exploded 30 yards to his right, spraying volcanic rock and shrapnel into his face, but he did not stop his pace. After returning to the A Company position, the platoon leader pointed to a 3rd bunker. This one was larger, constructed of reinforced concrete, with a Type 96 light machine gun controlling the vital road to the airfield. 2 previous attacks had failed, and 4 Marines lay dead before the position. Stein loaded a brand new ammo box into the Stinger, checked the feed belt. Although the weapon was hot from the previous battle, the slender aviation barrel could still withstand it. He stood up alone to advance on the bunker. The Type 96 light machine gun immediately opened fire, bullets grazing over his head and chest. But he continued forward. The Stinger shouldered and opened fire at 50 yards. The extremely high rate of fire gave the Japanese shooter no time to adjust his aim. Stein's bullets hit the firing port, and the enemy machine gun fell silent. He rushed past the final 20 yards, threw a grenade into the bunker, and the explosion killed the 3 crew members inside. Stein turned to reload, but the ammo box was empty again. In 46 minutes of combat, he had consumed 300 rounds. The value of the Stinger was proven, but the logistics problem was becoming apparent. The speed at which it suppressed and destroyed enemy positions far exceeded any standard machine gun, yet it required constant resupply. He began his second rush toward the beach, and this time, on the way, he encountered 2 wounded men. One with a chest perforation wound, the other with a part of his right hand blown off by shrapnel. Stein could not carry 2 people simultaneously. He first took the soldier with the chest wound to the corpsman, replenished ammunition, and then specially returned a third time to rescue the second wounded man. By 10:30 a.m., Stein had traveled to and from the beach 4 times, safely transferring a wounded man each time and bringing back a batch of ammunition. His platoon had advanced 200 yards inland, destroying 7 enemy positions, and Stein personally killed at least 15 Japanese soldiers. But the Stinger also began to show wear. The barrel changed color due to high heat, and the electric trigger started to jam. Stein's boots were gradually damaged in the volcanic ash and continuous running. The soles were almost worn flat, the leather cracked and torn, and every step was accompanied by severe pain in his arches. Stein made a seemingly crazy decision. He untied his laces, took off his boots, and stepped barefoot onto the volcanic ash. He clearly knew the trade-off involved. Every second was vital. Boots increased friction and slowed speed. Although the volcanic ash was rough, the temperature in the shade was bearable, and barefoot he could run faster. He also took off his M1 steel helmet, weighing 2.5 pounds, shedding nearly 5 pounds of load with the boots, which allowed him to move faster between the beach and the platoon position. The 5th round trip to the beach took only 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Bare feet actually gained better traction in the loose volcanic sand, although the volcanic ash was as rough as running on broken glass, and the pain was unbearable. The speed truly increased. On the way, he saved another comatose wounded man hit in the abdomen by shrapnel, carried him to the corpsman, and returned to A Company's position full of ammunition. At 11 a.m., Stein had traveled to and from the beach 6 times, saving 6 wounded men, bringing back 600 rounds of ammo, and personally destroying another 5 enemy positions. The platoon had advanced 300 yards from the beach, approaching the first airfield. The Japanese resistance became increasingly fierce. They built a defensive network composed of bunkers, spider holes, and underground shelters connected by tunnels. When one position was destroyed, soldiers would pour out from another to continue shooting. The Stinger was the only weapon in A Company that could provide sufficient firepower while simultaneously suppressing multiple positions. When Stein fired at one bunker, the roar of 1,200 rounds per minute was enough to make enemies in neighboring positions hesitate, and this momentary hesitation gave riflemen time to advance and throw grenades. But the wear on the weapon was also intensifying. After continuous firing, the barrel was visibly glowing red. The slender aviation-grade steel was not designed for prolonged ground combat. It relied on the 300 men-per-hour airflow during dive bombing for cooling, while on the ground there was no airflow, only constantly accumulating heat. The electric trigger mechanism was also aging. This component Stein made from metal scraps in Hawaii worked, but was far less reliable than factory production. Sometimes it would stick. Sometimes he wanted a burst, but only one shot fired, and he had to strike it with his palm to reset it. At 11:20 a.m., the platoon Stein was in encountered a fortified Japanese position, which had already halted the advance of 2 other companies. This was a concrete bunker, featuring 3 firing ports, controlling access to Airfield No. 1. Inside were multiple Type 96 light machine guns forming a crossfire. 2 tank destroyers had tried to destroy it, but both retreated after being hit by concealed 47mm anti-tank guns. Airstrikes had also been called, but the bombs missed the target by 50 yards, and the bunker was still operating. Stein observed the position. The firing ports were narrow, about 8 inches wide, 4 inches high, and although hard to aim at, the Stinger's rate of fire meant that as long as he pulled the trigger at the port, statistically, bullets would hit. He advanced alone, went prone at 50 yards, and fired. He emptied a 100-round box in 7 seconds. At least 30 bullets passed through the firing port, and the Japanese machine gun inside fell silent. Stein reloaded and rushed the bunker, threw a grenade into the port. The explosion killed the 5 crew members inside, and A Company's attack was able to continue. The 7th round trip to the beach was at 11:50 a.m. This time he carried a Marine whose legs below the knees were blown off by a landmine. The soldier was still conscious, screaming in pain. Stein carried him the full 200 yards. The soldier's blood soaked his uniform, and the corpsman later stated that if Stein had arrived 30 seconds later, this soldier would have died from excessive blood loss. On the return trip, Stein encountered something unexpected. Another Marine carrying a Stinger. He was Greavy's other gunner in G Company, whose weapon had permanently jammed due to overheating. The barrel deformed, and he was taking it back to the beach, hoping the armorer could repair it. Stein looked at his own Stinger. The barrel had turned purple from high heat. The wooden part of the Garand stock began to char. The bipod was loose, but it could still shoot. At 12:30 p.m., he made his 8th round trip to the beach, saved another wounded man, and brought back a batch of ammo. By this time, other Marines had all noticed this corporal running barefoot back and forth under artillery fire. Some thought he was crazy. Others called him the bravest man on Iwo Jima. But Stein never thought about bravery or lack thereof. He only cared about practical needs. The platoon needed ammo. The wounded needed evacuation. He ran faster barefoot. The Stinger provided the suppression fire needed for advancing, and the rest was merely execution. However, on the 8th return, the situation changed. A Japanese sniper had occupied a position overlooking the supply route. When Stein returned to A Company carrying 4 ammo boxes, a bullet whistled past just 6 inches above his head. He immediately dove into the volcanic ash, the Stinger landing beside him. This was the first time that day he was suppressed. This sniper was highly skilled. Although Stein could not see his position, judging from the firing angle, the opponent should be on the ridge line, 200 yards to the east, possibly hiding in a spider hole or behind volcanic rock. The Japanese sniper was well trained, patient, and disciplined, willing to wait hours for a high-value target, and Stein, repeatedly crossing open ground, was obviously a priority target. Stein lay motionless for 30 seconds, controlling his breathing. The sniper would watch closely for any movement, and the volcanic ash around him offered no cover, only open terrain between the beach and the forward position. Another bullet whistled over his head. The sniper was aiming at his previous position, not his current landing spot, which meant the opponent had not yet locked onto his exact location. Stein knew he had 10 seconds. He rolled to the left, grabbed the Stinger, and got up to run, not toward the platoon position, but rushing toward the sniper. His logic was simple. Running perpendicular to the sniper's aim line was harder to hit than fleeing directly. If he could close the distance, the Stinger's fire rate could suppress a single-shot rifle. 3 more bullets attacked, all missed. Stein sprinted barefoot in the volcanic ash with full force, clutching the stinger tightly, the ammo boxes in his pack shaking constantly. At 150 yards, he saw movement, a figure hiding in a spider hole partially obscured by volcanic rock. Stein kneeled on one knee and fired. The stinger roared, 1,200 rounds per minute shredding the rock and surrounding terrain, and the sniper's position was destroyed. After the ammo box ran dry, there was no more return fire. Stein reloaded, approached cautiously, and found the sniper dead, a Type 97 rifle lying beside him. He took the rifle's scope and continued toward the A Company position. When he arrived at 01:00 p.m., the battle situation had deteriorated. A company was pinned down by a semicircular defensive work consisting of at least 8 bunkers. Crossfire ensured any Marine who stood up was immediately attacked by multiple positions, and in the past 20 minutes, the company had paid the price of 12 casualties to advance. The company commander had called for tank support, but the M4 Sherman tanks were still deep in the volcanic ash near the beach. The soft ground caused tanks to frequently throw tracks or get stuck, and artillery support was also limited, as forward observers could not get a clear view of enemy positions. Stein moved to the most forward position to assess the situation. 8 bunkers formed an arc 100 yards ahead, and Japanese soldiers were still moving in the trenches connecting the positions. This was not static defense, but a coordinated combat system. The advantage of the Stinger lay in fire density. Stein judged that if he could simultaneously suppress multiple positions, riflemen could advance under cover, but this required him to expose himself again. He stood up, fired at the leftmost bunker, a 5-second burst of 100 bullets. The position fell silent. Then he turned to the next bunker. Another burst, silent again. He methodically advanced along the arc of positions, suppressing every target one by one. Japanese soldiers in the trenches began shooting at him. Bullets from Type 99 rifles and Type 96 light machine guns kicked up volcanic ash at his feet. One bullet hit the Stinger's barrel, making a metal impact sound, but the weapon kept firing. Stein dove to reload after emptying the box, and in this interval, a company's rifleman advanced 50 yards. When he stood up to continue shooting, the soldiers advanced another 50 yards. This coordination was purely instinctual, needing no orders. Marines understood that when the Stinger fired, that was their time to move. At A1:30 p.m., a company broke through the defensive arc. 5 of the 8 bunkers were destroyed, the other 3 abandoned. 17 Japanese soldiers were confirmed killed. Although the company lost another 3 Marines, the attack continued. By now, Stein's Stinger was severely damaged. The barrel was slightly bent after being hit by a bullet. The bipod was completely broken. The Garand stock was charred black, but it could still shoot. At 01:45 p.m., while attacking the 6th bunker, a situation occurred that Stein had trained for, but hoped never to encounter. While he was firing continuously, a Japanese Type 96 machine gun directly hit the Stinger, and the massive impact force tore the weapon from his hands, throwing it into the volcanic ash 6 feet away. Stein immediately dove behind a low rock ridge. At this moment he was unarmed, and the Stinger lay on the open ground between him and the enemy bunker. The Japanese soldiers had seen the weapon drop, knew he lost his armament, and were waiting for him to try and retrieve it. Stein looked at the smoking Stinger lying in the volcanic ash. He could see the feed mechanism was damaged. Even if retrieved, it might not be usable, but this weapon had accompanied him back and forth to the beach 8 times, destroyed over 15 enemy positions, and saved the lives of comrades in the platoon. He prepared to rush into the open to retrieve it. Just as he rushed out, the Japanese machine gun immediately opened fire, bullets grazing past his head and torso. Stein ran in a Z pattern, increasing the difficulty of being hit. Arriving at the weapon 3 seconds later, he grabbed it and rolled behind another rock ridge to inspect. The feed mechanism was jammed. A bullet had hit the feed unit, causing the rail to bend. Stein pulled out the damaged belt, cleaned the jam with his fingers, loaded a fresh box, and the weapon resumed feeding. He test-fired 3 bursts, confirmed it was usable, then stood up and fired the entire box of 100 rounds in 7 seconds at that bunker, which had shot down his weapon. The position was thoroughly destroyed, and that Type 96 machine gun, which nearly killed him, fell permanently silent. Stein reloaded and continued to throw himself into the attack. By 02 Saar p.m., a company had advanced 400 yards inland from the beach, destroying 23 enemy positions, of which at least 12 were destroyed under Stein's personal lead. His act of running barefoot to the beach saved 9 wounded Marines, and the Stinger, despite enduring gunfire, overheating, and mechanical wear, was still shooting tenaciously, but the weapon's status was precarious. The barrel was obviously bent, the fire rate dropped to about 900 rounds per minute. The electric trigger could only fire bursts of 3 to 5 rounds, even if he wanted continuous fire, and the wooden stock was charred seriously, beginning to fragment. At 02:30 p.m., while attacking a fortified trench system, the Stinger was hit again. A Type 99 rifle bullet struck the gun body, and the weapon was knocked from Stein's hands for the second time, landing in a shell crater 10 feet away. At this point, Stein was completely exposed in open ground, without cover and unarmed. Japanese soldiers in the trench fired at him with rifles and grenades, and he could see at least 6 enemies. He rushed toward the Stinger. A grenade exploded 5 yards behind him. Volcanic ash and shrapnel flew, fragments hitting his left leg and back. Though not fatal wounds, the pain was unbearable. He grabbed the Stinger and dove into the crater. A deep bullet mark was left on the gun body. Stein manually yanked the bolt. Though stiff, it could still operate. He loaded a fresh belt, aimed at the trench, and fired. The Stinger barely maintained operation, rate of fire dropping to about 600 rounds per minute, but this was still faster than other weapons on the battlefield. Stein suppressed the trench fire. Riflemen took the chance to throw grenades and advance. The position was successfully cleared. 6 Japanese soldiers were killed, and A Company's attack continued to push forward. By 03:00 p.m., Stein completed his 8th beach round trip, cumulatively firing over 2,000 rounds, carrying a wounded man on each return. His feet were dripping blood from running barefoot in volcanic ash, his uniform soaked with sweat and the blood of the wounded. The Stinger was nearly scrapped. The barrel bent 5 degrees. The stock held together, barely by friction. The electric trigger fired without pattern, sometimes 5 rounds, sometimes failing to fire, and Stein had to manually pull the bolt to reset between bursts. But a company had achieved the objective, arriving at the foot of Mount Suribachi. This volcanic peak overlooked the island's southern tip, altitude 550 feet. Japanese observers on the summit could see all U.S. positions on the beach clearly. Artillery observers guided fire from the heights. Taking this mountain was imperative. At 05 South p.m., the platoon Stein was in received orders to establish defensive positions for the night. The attack on Mount Suribachi would begin the next morning. At this moment, a company needed to consolidate positions, replenish supplies, and counterattacks. Stein finally had time to check his own condition. Both feet were torn and bleeding. Volcanic ash seeped into every wound, causing infection. His left calf and lower back retained shrapnel fragments, though light wounds they needed treatment. His hands were covered in blisters from holding the scorching Stinger. The whole man was exhausted. He had fought continuously for 8 hours, ran barefoot under artillery fire to the beach 8 times, cumulatively ran about 3 miles, carrying wounded and ammo the whole way. The Stinger lay beside the spider hole, thoroughly destroyed. The barrel needed replacement, gun body damaged, stock burned, trigger mechanism failed, but it completed its mission. When standard weapons could not break the beachhead stalemate, it pushed A Company to keep moving forward. Other Marines began calling him the Barefoot Corporal. Some thought he was crazy. Others thought he was the bravest person they had ever seen, But Stein did not care about these evaluations. He simply did what should be done. The platoon needed fire support. The Stinger provided support. The rest was irrelevant. That night, as Stein tried to rest in a spider hole, Japanese infiltrators began probing a company's defensive perimeter, small groups, 2 to 3 men, scouting for weak points. Stein grabbed the Stinger. Even in terrible condition, it still had one advantage: fire density. When a Japanese soldier appeared 30 yards away, Stein pulled the trigger, the weapon fired successfully, and the infiltrator was killed. By dawn on February 20th, Stein had been sleepless for 22 consecutive hours. At 08:04 a.m., the attack on Mount Suribachi began. A company climbed the volcanic slope with other units of the 28th Regiment. The terrain was extremely harsh. Loose volcanic ash, zero vegetation, exposed ridges allowing Japanese observers to capture every movement. The Japanese had built over 60 bunkers, shelters, and cave positions on the mountain. Every path was covered by crossfire. They spent months reinforcing defenses, stocking ammo, food, and water in the tunnel systems, swearing to make the U.S. military pay for every inch of land. Stein climbed the mountain with the Stinger. The armorer repaired it overnight, replacing the most damaged parts. The barrel was still bent, but a new feed mechanism was installed. The electric trigger was more reliable. The weapon could fire normally, yet it was never again that devastating sharp weapon. On February 20th at 09:30 a.m., a company encountered a fortified bunker group halfway up the southern slope. 4 concrete bunkers connected by trenches, equipped with multiple machine gun positions. Mortar teams fired from hidden pits. The 28th Regiment's attack stalled. Stein went up with the Stinger, locked onto the main bunker, and fired. The damaged barrel reduced accuracy, but at close range, fire density still played a key role. He suppressed the position long enough to let the demolition team carry satchel charges up. The bunker was destroyed, and A Company advanced another 50 yards. At 10:15 a.m., Stein's luck ran out. A Japanese grenade landed 3 feet beside him. He saw the grenade, tried to dodge, but the explosion still happened before he escaped. Shrapnel hit his right arm, right leg, and torso. Multiple injuries, though no immediate fatal wound, but bleeding was severe. A corpsman arrived within minutes, bandaged his wounds, and called for evacuation, but Stein refused. His platoon was still fighting. The Stinger still needed to play a role. For the next 2 hours, Stein continued providing fire support while bandages oozed blood. The Stinger operated tenaciously after heavy damage. Whenever a bunker fired at advancing Marines, Stein suppressed it. Whenever Japanese soldiers appeared in trenches, he annihilated them with continuous bursts. But by 12:30 p.m., Stein's injuries worsened. Excessive blood loss caused him dizziness and blurred vision. The corpsman told him he must evacuate immediately. Otherwise, he would die on the mountain. This time, Stein did not argue. He handed the Stinger to another Marine in the squad, allowed the corpsman to carry him down the slope to the beach, and was subsequently sent to a hospital ship anchored offshore. On February 21st, while Stein received treatment on the hospital ship, the 28th Regiment continued attacking Mount Suribachi. The fighting was extremely tragic. Every cave had to be cleared with flamethrowers and explosives. Every trench had to be taken through close quarters combat. Japanese soldiers would die rather than surrender. On February 23rd, at 10:20 a.m., a patrol from E Company reached the summit of Mount Suribachi and raised a small American flag. Photographer Joe Rosenthal captured this moment. That afternoon, a larger flag was raised. Rosenthal shot again, and this photo became the most iconic image of the Pacific War. Stein did not witness the flag raising. He was still receiving treatment on the hospital ship. Doctors removed shrapnel from his arm, leg, and torso, treated blood loss and infection, and told him he would be sent to a rear hospital in Hawaii, possibly even returning to the U.S. His war was over. But on February 25th, a piece of news reached the hospital ship, hitting Stein heavier than any grenade. The 5th Marine Division had moved north from Mount Suribachi to attack a position named Hill 362A. The battle was extremely cruel. The 28th Regiment suffered heavy casualties. A company lost 30% of its strength in 2 days. His platoon leader and squad leader were both killed. Those comrades who trained with him in Hawaii were dying on a nameless hill in the center of Iwo Jima. On February 26th, Tony Stein defied medical orders and left the hospital ship. He boarded a landing craft returning to the beach, telling the crew he was cleared to return to his unit. Actually not cleared. He was AWOL from the hospital ship. But no one stopped him. At 02:00 p.m., he arrived at the beach, found a supply sergeant to requisition new boots, both feet still bandaged, but could walk. Picked up an M1 Garand rifle from the supply station. The Stinger was nowhere to be found, perhaps destroyed, perhaps used by other Marines. But this was not important. Stein wanted to return to his own unit. He crossed 6 miles of Iwo Jima northward, stepping over volcanic ash, abandoned Japanese positions, burned tanks, and scattered equipment, passing cleanup squads collecting U.S. bodies, and arrived at A Company's position on Hill 362A on February 27th. By this time, the company had plummeted from the original 240 men to 63. Survivors were exhausted, fighting continuously for 8 days, sleepless and restless, facing enemies who would rather die than surrender, only endless combat. Stein reported to the company commander and was immediately sent to the line. A company needed every rifle. For the next 2 days, Stein fought in cruel close-quarters combat around Hill 362A. Without the Stinger, with only an M1 Garand rifle and grenades, the combat pace slowed and required more caution, but Stein remained efficient. On March 1st, 1945, a company received a mission: execute a reconnaissance patrol to locate a Japanese bunker group harassing the regiment's advance. The patrol consisted of 19 Marines. Tony Stein was appointed assistant patrol leader. The mission was to advance about 400 yards, confirm enemy position locations, bring back actionable intelligence, scout only, do not attack. At 07:00 a.m., the patrol departed from A Company's line. The terrain was composed of volcanic ridges and canyons, extremely prone to ambush. Japanese soldiers had hidden positions all over the area. Snipers, machine gun nests, and mortar teams all hid in caves and spider holes. The patrol advanced slowly, 20 yards, stopped to observe, listen, then advance another 20 yards. The Marines knew Japanese defenders were watching them. The question was only when the enemy would open fire. At 07:45 a.m., the patrol reached a ridgeline overlooking a small valley. Stein walked to the front to better observe the terrain. Through the volcanic rock formation, he saw a target suspected to be a camouflage position, possibly a bunker, possibly a cave entrance. The patrol needed to get close to confirm. Stein signaled the team to advance, taking the first step himself. M1 Garand rifle, ready at any time. His feet were still wrapped in bandages from the barefoot run 8 days ago. Every step was accompanied by pain. The shrapnel wounds on his right arm and leg were not fully healed, but he continued forward, because this was what must be done. At 07:52 a.m., a gunshot broke the silence. A bullet hit Tony Stein in the head, and he fell in response. The gunshot came from a hidden position about 200 yards to the northeast, possibly a spider hole or cave entrance. The patrol could not see the shooter. A corpsman rushed to Stein's side within seconds, but was powerless to save him. The wound was fatal. On March 1st, 1945, at 07:53 a.m., 23-year-old Corporal Tony Stein died in the volcanic ash of Iwo Jima. The patrol returned fire at the suspected sniper position, called for mortar support, and the area was covered by high explosive bombs. But whether the sniper was killed in the bombing was never confirmed. Japanese soldiers rarely left bodies that U.S. forces could find. The patrol completed the mission, confirmed the location of the bunker group, returned to A Company with intelligence, and simultaneously carried back Tony Stein's body. The news of Stein's sacrifice spread quickly through the 28th Regiment, that barefoot corporal who ran to the beach 8 times on February 19th, the Marine who refused to evacuate after injury, the toolmaker from Dayton, built a weapon from recovered aircraft parts, destroyed countless enemy positions. On March 2nd, Stein was buried in the 5th Division Cemetery on Iwo Jima. A simple wooden cross marked his grave, carved with his service number, rank, and unit designation, mentioning neither the Stinger nor the Medal of Honor that would later be awarded in his name. After Stein's sacrifice, the Battle of Iwo Jima lasted another 24 days. The fighting remained cruel. The 28th Regiment pushed north, clearing cave groups and fortified positions. U.S. casualties continued to increase. Until March 26th, when the island was finally declared secured, nearly 7,000 U.S. troops had died. 20,000 were wounded. Japanese casualties were even heavier. Of 21,000 defenders, survivors were fewer than 1,000. The rest either died in battle or committed suicide, refusing to surrender. The tunnel system beneath Iwo Jima became a massive tomb, but in the first 8 hours of the battle on February 19th, Tony Stein and his improvised weapon changed the situation. His barefoot running saved 9 wounded men who would have died on the beach. His suppression fire allowed a company to advance when other units stalled. His mechanical genius provided the Marine Corps with a weapon that changed the tactical landscape on that day. The other 5 Stingers, built by Merritt Greevy and John Little, also saw combat on Iwo Jima. 2 were destroyed by enemy fire. 1 permanently jammed due to overheating, and the other 2 survived the battle, but were lost in the chaotic post-war equipment disposal. The original 6 Stingers now have none remaining. They were field-modified non-standard equipment. Such weapons are usually destroyed by the military rather than preserved, but the legend of the Stinger remains in Marine Corps history. Armorers and mechanics heard this story. The toolmaker from Ohio modified an aerial machine gun into an infantry weapon, ran barefoot in volcanic ash to resupply the platoon, refused evacuation after injury, should have recovered on a hospital ship, but returned to the battlefield. In May 1945, Lieutenant Colonel Chandler Johnson submitted a recommendation to apply for the Medal of Honor for Tony Stein. The recommendation detailed his deeds on February 19th, 8 round trips to the beach, evacuating wounded, destroying enemy positions, running barefoot under fire. This recommendation was recognized by officers at all levels of the chain of command: Regiment, Division, Fleet, Marine, Force Pacific. Everyone who reviewed the post-war reports agreed. Corporal Tony Stein demonstrated extraordinary courage and fearlessness beyond the call of duty, willing to fight at the risk of his life. On February 19, 1946, coinciding with the 1-year anniversary of Stein's heroic combat on Iwo Jima, his widow Joan accepted the Medal of Honor at a ceremony in the Ohio State House, presented by Ohio Governor Frank Lausch. Joan stood in the governor's office, overwhelmed by the weight of this medal and the memories it carried. Stein's mother Rose also attended the ceremony, tears sliding down her face. Her son, this child of Jewish immigrants, a high school dropout who became a toolmaker, finally received the nation's highest military honor. The citation for the Medal of Honor reads in part, "Being the first man in his unit to be on station after hitting the beach in the initial landing, Corporal Stein, armed with a personally improvised aircraft-type weapon, provided rapid covering fire as the remainder of his platoon attempted to move into position. When his comrades were pinned down by a concentrated machine gun and mortar barrage, he gallantly stood upright and exposed himself to the enemy's view, thereby drawing the hostile fire to his own person and aiding him in observing the location of the furiously firing hostile guns. Determined to neutralize the strategically placed weapons, he boldly charged the enemy pillboxes one by one and succeeded in killing 20 of the enemy during the furious, single-handed assault. The citation also used 3 paragraphs to describe in detail his 8 beach-round trips, the number of wounded evacuated, and the deed of refusing medical treatment after injury, mentioning the personally improvised aircraft-type weapon, but did not use the name Stinger. This name exists only in the oral history of the Marine Corps. Tony Stein's remains stayed on Iwo Jima until December 1948, then were transported back to Dayton and buried with full military honors. The ceremony at Our Lady of the Rosary Church attracted hundreds of mourners, veterans, family, and civilians who never met him but understood the spirit he represented. He was buried in Calvary Cemetery in Dayton, the city's only Medal of Honor recipient during WWII. His tombstone is carved with rank, unit designation, and medals received. To this day, visitors still leave coins and small American flags at the grave. In 1972, the U.S. Navy built the frigate USS Stein to commemorate him. The ship served for 21 years, participating in multiple operations in the Pacific and Indian Oceans. After decommissioning in 1993, it was finally dismantled, but the name Tony Stein remains in Navy records. The Marine Corps preserved his story in training materials and historical records. At Boot Camp Parris Island, drill instructors teach improvisation and adaptability in combat. Tony Stein's story is part of the curriculum. The toolmaker used recovered aviation parts to build a weapon, ran barefoot in volcanic ash to save comrades. The Stinger itself also became a legend in military firearms history. Ian McCollum, host of Forgotten Weapons, recorded the weapon's design and history. The Canadian Historical Arms Museum built a functional replica for educational purposes, demonstrating the achievement Tony Stein and Merritt Greevey accomplished using only basic tools and mechanical knowledge. They modified an aviation machine gun designed for 300 mph airflow into a ground combat weapon, solving the Marine Corps' firepower problem with recovered parts and wisdom. Military historians still debate whether the Stinger had tactical importance. A regiment had only 6 weapons, limited impact on the whole battle. But for the Marines fighting alongside them, these 6 weapons meant everything. Suppression fire allowed attacks that would have stalled to advance. The psychological shock of 1,200 rounds per minute kept enemies from raising their heads at critical moments. But Tony Stein's courage is unquestionable. 8 round trips under fire, evacuating 9 wounded, running barefoot in volcanic ash, refusing evacuation after injury, AWOL from hospital ship to return to unit, sacrificing while leading a patrol. This barefoot corporal from Dayton represents the core of the Marine Corps spirit. Improvise, adapt, overcome. When standard equipment fails, build something better. When injured, continue fighting. When ordered to rest, return to the unit. When facing desperate situations, charge forward courageously. Tony Stein was only 23 years old when he died, served for 2 years and 5 months, fought on 2 islands. The number of enemy soldiers killed exceeded official records, saved 9 lives in a single day, and all this started with a weapon he participated in building in a Hawaii maintenance shed. If this story also touched you, please help out by clicking the like button. Every single like will let YouTube recommend this story to more people. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We are digging up forgotten stories from dusty archives every day, about toolmakers, about Marines who saved lives with recovered aviation machine guns and barefoot courage, about real people, real heroes. Leave a comment in the section right now. Tell us where you are watching from. Is it the United States, the UK, Canada, Australia, or somewhere else? Our community is spread all over the globe. You are not just a viewer, but a part of keeping these memories alive. Share your location. Say if anyone in your family has served in the military. Let us know you are here. Thanks for watching, and thank you for ensuring Tony Stein's story will not be buried in silence. These heroes deserve to be remembered, and you are helping make this moment a reality.